Welcome. I am your host, Cindy Watson, and today we are going to be talking with Thomas Simeone, who's really done some great work getting visibility within his practice and certainly exemplifies practicing with purpose. And for those of you who don't know Thomas, you're in for a real treat. He's a trial attorney and he's the managing partner at Simeone Miller. And he has appeared on MSNBC, on Fox News, on WILA. He's been in the Washington Post, New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, ESPN of all things, and more. Done a great job, as I say, getting some visibility and obviously has a high level of credibility. So welcome, Thomas. It's so great to have you here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those kind words, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, why don't we kickstart with you? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you want to pursue a career as an attorney.
You know, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer in high school. I don't know why. It just something came up to me, whether it be the politics, the history, the arguing, I don't know, maybe it was a control freak. Who knew? But so I went to college and I got an accounting degree simply because it's very practical. I could make some money before law school. And someone told me it's good to know as a lawyer, just the numbers side of everything. And that was it. And so I just took it from there. So even though I went and worked as an accountant, I went right to law school after a couple of years. And, I will say that, you always think what other careers you could do. Law is definitely my top three. Maybe I'd be happier doing, I don't know, something else, but this is up there. So I'm very happy with my decision.
Yeah. What are your other two, if you don't mind sharing? It always intrigues me about what the alternatives were.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I love psychology, and I've always thought I could be a psychologist or psychiatrist. And the other one is historian.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I think it is, I think I actually enjoy learning and studying history. And so maybe it's better as a hobby, and same with psychology. I love doing it. Maybe if I did it for a living, it would take the fun out of it. But yeah, so I like those two areas. So I see myself doing that. And I kind of do it now in my spare time as a hobby. I love reading books about those things.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We have some real parallels then, because for me, it was always, I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist for a long time. And then I realized you had to go to medical school, and that required a really strong science and math, my two least favorite things. And then I'm like, all right, option number two, law it is then. But I'm doing a lot of coaching work now, which is a form of psychology in some ways. So totally understand that drive. Now, I'm curious, do you find that the accounting background, because when you said it, you probably noticed I kind of shuddered, that like whole dealing with numbers, but we don't really learn the business of law in law school. So did you find that was an advantage for you, Thomas? Or
Yeah, it was an advantage for two reasons. One is telling people that you have a CPA, is a lot more impressive probably than it should be. People go, wow. And it doesn't have a huge direct effect on your law practice. Most great lawyers don't have one, but it just sounds very impressive. So it's good from that perspective. But secondly, just to have some familiarity with numbers. A lot of lawyers, you put if they're calculating damages or trying to anything with numbers on it, they kind of shudder a little bit. They get a little nervous. They feel like they're going into foreign territory. So they have some familiarity with that. It alleviates the stress. And like in my office, whenever something complex financially comes up, people come to me. So you actually do become a resource, and you can tell clients and work through it all. So helpful, it's definitely very helpful.
Yeah, I could totally see that, because as you're saying, I practiced social justice for 30 years and represented a lot of trade unions, a lot of collective bargaining. As soon as you started about all of those pension contributions and computations, you're right. There's that little bit of that imposter syndrome comes up that makes us nervous. But even just running our own practice, like I have had nightmares with our accountants, and having that trust to know that your numbers and how it works must be a great relief. So I would love to hear, you obviously have had some incredible success, in your practice. And certainly, as I say, getting that exposure. I'd be interested in how you define success. What does success mean to you, Thomas?
That's a great question. I teach a course at GW Law School. It's called The Art of Lawyering. And
love it.
It's for students who have an internship, but they meet with me once a week and they learn kind of the practicalities of practice, everything from networking, client relations, ethics, all that stuff. And one of the things I'm always telling them about is just that is what is success? The example I use, which I think is kind of funny, but and it's timely now, but I always use Elvis Presley as an example. I say, Elvis Presley, if you go to Graceland, through the roof, commercial success, he's a household name career-wise, but the poor man, died in his 40s. Whatever, maybe in the fame didn't save him. Was that a successful career or not? We don't know. It may have fed to his problems. And so the answer I always tell people is, especially in law schools, your goal isn't so much to be a successful lawyer, but to have a successful life. Let law play into that, in the sense that if it's not working for you, choose something else. And I mean, within law, or if you have to leave them and so forth. But really, so I do with my students, I make a goal, you know, ask them to make some goals. What are the 3 or 4 or 5 most important things to you? Then as you start going through your career, are you getting those through your career or not? And so for me, so to me, success is, again, just that. I like working for myself. I try to keep my hours reasonable. I really enjoy working out, families and friends and hobbies, and they matter. I probably could make more money if I worked more or did other crazier stuff, but it's just not worth it for me. And that's the key, is figuring out what you like as a person.
Yeah, I love that on so many levels. As you know, this podcast is called Practicing with Purpose. And I think we are so conditioned to go for the almighty dollar, right? Our docketing system, everything about the practice is designed to that. And first off, let me congratulate, hats off for that art of lawyering course. I'm going to want to circle back to that in a bit, but I wish they had that when I was around, and I'm going to want to pick your brain a bit about that. But so timely that you use Elvis. We just saw that movie on Friday as well. And it was heartbreaking when you see like such talent at the pinnacle of his career in many ways. And you're right. What is the point of any of the fame or success in those traditional definitions, all the money in the world, if you're leading a life that doesn't bring you pleasure, where there's no passion and no sense of purpose anymore? So I love that. What's something that you attribute your success to? And I'm sure our listeners would love to know, like, how did you come into getting so much visibility on some of the major mainstream sort of news outlets?
2 answers. One is, I've always taken the approach that if you get in the field you like, and you got to look at the right parameters. Like I said, I enjoy helping people. I actually do like legal issues and the challenges and the cases and so forth. And if I make a ton of money, great. If I don't, well, so be it. I know I'll have enough to get by. And when you take that approach, I think it frees you up then to go and be your best, because you're not always second guessing yourself. Should I do this? Should I do that? So part of it for me is just simply going out and just trying to be a good lawyer, doing what I do best. But I'll be honest too, there is also an element, whenever I saw a good press or publicity opportunity, I pursued it, because I know that, you know, that does matter to people. And not everyone's like me. They want to see, you know, if they see you on TV, they think you're great. And you may not be any better. You just got a good interview, but you might as well do it in your favor, right? You might as well take the opportunities that work. So for me, it was just that, just doing the best I could, focus on doing what I could, but when the opportunities were there, seizing them if I could.
Yeah. And recognizing, I think, you know, you're being very humble about it, because I don't think many people even recognize when those opportunities are there. And obviously you did. So maybe just give us an example of like, how would that opportunity present itself to you?
Yeah, well, I had one case when I was on MSNBC. I had represented, it was a gay man against the Library of Congress. It was an allegation of discrimination. And there were other lawyers involved on the case as well. And they basically, MSNBC reached out and they wanted to talk to someone. And the other lawyers said, Tom, you can do it and handle it. And it was, you know, the worst timing, you know, and I wasn't sure what to do, but you just go and you show up. And I've had other ones too. They're actually, what I've got is, once you start answering the reporters, I've noticed, if your name gets out there, and I've had a few come in. Now, those don't turn into like TV interviews, but as far as links on web pages and articles and so forth, they'll come back to you. So what you have to do is, when you talk to a reporter, give them your time, attention, give them all the information they need. They may not use you. They may not use you the way you love. If you keep doing that, you know, eventually the opportunities come, you know?
Yeah. That's great advice. Such great advice. And I wanted to circle back, because one thing you said is still sticking in my head too, about that. Hey, you know, I wasn't worried. I knew I'd get by. It wasn't all about the money. It was about doing what I loved. And I'd be interested in your perspective, because in my experience, when you let go of that expectation where it's all about the money and you just show up being the best you can be with passion, ironically, the money comes, right? I mean, you attract more people, you get that higher quality sort of client as well. Your reputation increases, and things just snowball, because it's letting go of the expectation or the need, I guess, for the money that actually brings more. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it takes the pressure off you. And, you know, and tell you what got me doing on all this stuff was, and I think, and this is going to sound somewhat somber or serious here, whatever, but when you see someone pass away, or that, you know, we don't live forever, and you actually get to that point when the person, you know, passes away, and you see what's really important in their life. It wasn't the bank account, the savings account, how, you know, 4 cars. It was the time you spent, you laugh, you joke, and you're sad that life's gone. I think I learned that at an early age. And then you're right, it gave me a great freedom, because I said, as long I'm just not motivated by money, which ended up being a little bit of a blessing. And even if we do well on a case or a client's happy, I just get a buzz there. You know, I like money. like everybody else. But once you get a certain amount, you're like, it's just not the primary goal. And I think that's a real blessing. And that's why I tell my students, really make a list and be honest. If it is money for you, that's fine. Choose a certain legal career where money's it. But I get them thinking that, and rarely is it number one. Most of it moves down the list, which I think is where most people are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because I think most of us start and again, there are some exceptions, but I would say the vast majority of people go into the practice of law because they want to make a difference in the world. And I think somewhere along the line, the process grinds them down. And that's why so many end up leaving the practice in droves, because they lose that sense of purpose, right? Started. I'd be interested in your thoughts on COVID, because it really struck me, Thomas, when you said, about the fact that the fragility, I guess those weren't your words, but basically like when somebody passes, you recognize that, none of us know what our life is going to hold for us, how long we're going to be here on this, planet. And COVID seems to me to have really refocused people to open them up to a different way of being, reprioritize their life. What's been your experience in your practice around that?
I agree. And what else has done it too? COVID reminded me of, I remember after 9/11.
Yes.
A lot of people, for some reason, I knew one woman who just said, it struck her such that I want to cancel my day job. And she went to move be an actor. And why 9/11 somehow resonated with her that it could all end in a because we finally had an attack here in the US and all that. And you're right. I think COVID to some degree, especially when you see, it's sad, like celebrities and so forth go, and older people that have been around a while, you're like, wow, it was just everywhere. But I agree with you. And it's sad, but that, maybe life has its cycles and everything has its purpose. Maybe even death and illness has that purpose of reminding us that, we only have so much time, make the most of it, not from a hedonistic way, but what matters to you most of it, right?
Yeah, that sense of purpose. I love that. I think it's great. And we all need these wake up calls every once in a while, in whatever form they come to us, right? So long as we heed it. Now, we talked about you being in the news a lot, and I know a lot of them, most of them center around your cases and that. I'd love if you could share with us, what's one of the most satisfying cases that you've ever had, and why, would you say?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to break it up into twofold. I get interest just being an advocate. I love taking on a case, knowing I did a good job, and I argued and fought, and it was my efforts that maybe took an okay case and made it good, or a good case and great, or whatever it might be, brought it successful. So I've got a couple of those. But the other side of it too is whether it's a worthy cause, and you've really helped people. And I will say the ones that we've liked, we've had, horrible cases, young children. I had one child who suffered serious burns. They were being cared for in a hot tub, and just, you can imagine horrible stuff. Yeah. And those are the ones that, not only do you get to actually be your lawyer and get the fulfillment of I did the best I can, the focus is also off you. You're doing it for a good cause rather than putting all your work and effort to, someone who just didn't need it or is not that big of a deal. So for me, the best cases are where I know I've done a good job. And again, usually it's just serious people. That one that strikes me, this young child, burns, it was just a bad case. Tons of challenges through it as far as who's responsible and immunities and all that stuff, big damages to work up. And it was just so gratifying when it wrapped up to A, succeed personally, but B, have someone benefit from it all.
Yeah, that's a beautiful duo, actually. I love that idea too, that cause combined with being able to bring your best self. Probably one of the reasons that attracted me to social justice law. You always had that, in activism mode, in addition to your advocacy mode, that, really inspires you to show up with that passion. So Thomas, I'd love if you could share with us what have been some of your biggest challenges in your practice, and how do you address them? I think as lawyers, we often don't talk about that, right? We feel this need to show up as invincible. We're always on top of everything. We've got everything. And so I'd love if you could share with us your challenges and any tips you have for how to address them moving forward.
Yeah, well, you're right. I think the one thing to do is I've always recognized where you are and cooperate with reality, in the sense that when you go in every day as a lawyer, just accept the fact that you're going to be worrying a bit. You're going to be stressed. That's our job. We sweat the details. Everybody relies on the lawyer to monitor the deadlines, write the letters, make the statements, whatever it is. And for me particularly, because I have a firm now that we have 6 lawyers, about 20 people total, roughly, and they all got their own cases and clients. And when things go well, I don't hear anything. Yeah. But whenever there's a problem, they come in, so you can literally spend your day, getting 8 hours or 9 hours of problems, and you could go home thinking, God, we're horrible. We're just horrible, because you're not seeing all the good stuff. Yeah. So I think the key thing, what I do is I will routinely go to our webpage and I'll read the testimonials of clients. We have hundreds of them that were good. I'll look at our successful results. I'll just take a deep breath, and it puts it in context for me that all these problems and issues and stresses I'm facing, that's just part of a successful career. You're not going to have, 365 good days in a year. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get your share of bad ones. So for me, when I remind myself of that the problems and issues, that's what we get paid for, is to deal with problems and issues, and they're not going to, turn into anything massive. That allows me to kind of keep an even keel. It's almost kind of a stoic way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great tip. It's easy to do. But at the deeper level, it's about perspective, right? Keeping perspective, because if we keep our nose to the grindstone and, what is that? Where your focus goes, your energy flows. If we're only focused on the problems, we can lose perspective. So something as simple as recognizing the value that you've brought to the table can allow you to show up that next day again with that sense of purpose and passion. I think that's a really profound, simple tip with some practical impact. So thanks for that. Now, what made you want to start teaching law? You've mentioned that. I said I wanted to circle back to it. I love that you do that.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when I was very young, I was, the accountant, or just graduated from school, was about to start my accounting. And I remember thinking, boy, I'll do this accounting. I really want to be a lawyer. And then I would love to teach. Those are things I just enjoyed. And then I'll be honest with you, somebody just introduced me to somebody at GW, and they were looking for young adjuncts to teach first years how to research and write.
Yeah.
I started doing that and I just loved it. And then I went to another course, and now I'm doing 3 courses at GW, and it's convenient because it's right nearby. So it's very quick over there and all that. And I know the community now. But yeah, so I kind of stumbled into it. Someone just introduced me, but I love it because you get to meet young people, and they have a new perspective. And I think that when you explain what you do and why you do it and so forth to younger people, or just, I'm younger, but someone doesn't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It forces you to get back in your fundamentals and put it in a perspective. Realize this is my role, what I do, what works, what doesn't. So it's almost a good reminder, refresher for you as much as it is for them, So that's what I get out of it.
Yeah. Now, you've touched on already about the art of lawyering, and I love your approach about, getting them to set those goals and priorities. Is that like what I was going to say? What's the most important thing that you want students taking away from your class?
That's a good question, because we have a sum up at the very end. We do the last class. And one is that point I think I mentioned you earlier. I tell them, watch, with your successful career, define success.
Yeah.
If you walk out of here, just that, knowing exactly what you want in your career, you won't stumble upon it, waste 3 years to do the wrong thing and learn it the hard way. You'll know right from the beginning. And it's free to change, right? You may at some point, change over time, have a family, this, that, whatever. You can always change your goals. But always keep in the back of your mind that your career needs to kind of serve you as a human, in addition to serving other people. So that's the first one. And then I tell them too, that even if you're doing it, no matter what your career goal is and so forth, it always makes sense to do it the right way and be good. For example, if you're going to come in 30 years and have a certain number of client calls and cases and so forth, if you're on top of the game, you're doing a good job. Those are all positive phone calls and positive experiences as much as possible, versus people who are kind of behind the 8 ball and not put enough time and attention. They still got to do those same experiences, but they're all negative. People are not happy with you. You feel stressed. Yeah. So I basically tell them, define your success and you just go and get it. Do a good job. Always. The answer to every situation is do your best.
Yeah. So great. And it's funny that, especially that first about define success. And as you were saying that, Thomas, it strikes me, it's about being really intentional, setting intentions about what you want out of it. Because, and you'd said you're not 3 years down the road. I think, God, I can think of a lot of lawyers who spend an entire career not really happy because they never set that intention for what they want to get out of it. So that's so powerful, right? And for our listeners out there, if you haven't done that yet, it is never too late. Like, choose today to set an intention for yourself. What do you want your practice to look like? What would be success for you? And what can you do to change to live into that success? I think that's really beautiful advice. Thanks for that. And I'd love if you could share, what are some things you've learned from your students? You mentioned about that fresh perspective. I bet you've had some interesting insights yourself.
Yeah, what's funny, because we do an exercise in the very beginning of the class to say, what are your 5 goals? What are your 5 values? And I'll be honest with you, I stole a little of this from Tony Robbins. I don't know if you've ever done the Tony Robbins tape. You're moving toward values and you're moving against. And I make them do it. I say, what's most important in life? And I remember that really helped me a bit, because I bought those CDs at the time with CDs, and I did them all. And it really got me thinking that you're right. If you just live your life and never even think what really matters, how do you know where you're going to go? And what are the odds of getting what you want if you don't even know what it is, you're not thinking it? But yeah, so I think doing my students, I think what I've learned from them is, and also doing it myself, again, I looked at, like, for example, I'm in personal injury law. I came out with an accounting degree, got a CPA, Price Waterhouse, then went to Columbia Law School, which is right up in New York, a lot of Wall Street people. Yeah. And clearly people thought I was going to go to tax or corporate law. And I ended up going into, people go, ambulance chasing, whatever you want to call it. But I just knew that was not a hard decision. And I just knew that like, I just would not be happy putting all my skills and efforts to make a corporation more or less money or taxes or whatever. Nothing wrong with it. Just not for me. I'd be better off with, working people. I just like that. And so once I found that I had that need to do that, it kind of makes my choices through my career a lot easier. So, so when I have my students do it and they talk about it, and the important thing too is, I know I'm belaboring this a bit, but you want to make sure you have your moving toward goals and then things that you want to avoid, problems and issues. And because Tony Robbins does this, because you can sometimes see inconsistencies. You're number one here and you're number three there and be like, wait a minute, I thought, is that really important to you or not? So watching all the students go through each year, just, it's really nice to me. I do it myself and it kind of keeps me going toward my goals.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder. Because I did do that for that program as well. I did a live event and I found as well the inconsistent when you lay out your moving towards sort of values and then you contrast that with your moving away, you also see some of those inconsistencies too, going, wow. And it caused me, but by the time the start of the exercise, by the time I got to the end, the values, the order of the values had flipped. Some of my values just disappeared off my chart altogether and new ones got put in. So that's a great exercise. And thank you for that reminder. What are some ways, what would you say are the top ways that you've gotten away from that more traditional sort of, competitive, sometimes soul-sucking fight mode of practicing to find a way to keep practicing on purpose, especially in your trial advocacy work? That civil litigation can be a real dog-eat-dog kind of environment sometimes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes to setting out your values, what's important to you. And once you do that, that's going to be your guiding star. But it's always been a little bit easy for me I remember some classic Greek guys, so people are motivated by three different things: fame, money, wisdom. And, and I don't know if it's totally true, but I was like, fame and money don't work for me. It must be that wisdom, which to me, I interpret as doing a good job, living a good life, very kind of positive values. So that's always helped me. But I think the one thing I always tell the students when they're watching out doing it is be careful of other people's confidence. And what I mean by that is some people will be incredibly confident, like they're doing this and that and whatever, and they can be making a giant mistake. And they could tell you and lead you to think you need to do this or that. We all kind of beat up our own confidences. So I tell them, just be careful. Now, someone else is very confident about something, it may or may not be true. That could be almost a defense by them. And the other thing I tell people do that I've done as well is I say, law especially has a great way of beating down your ego. It does. Opposing lawyers and reviewing attorneys and everybody, clients complain. They were literally kind of always finding fault with what you do and you didn't do it well enough or this or that. So in your self-esteem, it's so important that you can't just let that go unanswered. You need to put some work into it. So when you do something successful, let it sink in a bit. Fight that urge to just say, oh, I got lucky or no big deal, or that was just this one time I'm going to fail. But every time you have a good case and say, all right, I now know I'm capable of doing this and let it sink in. And that to me has been helpful. When I have that, I just don't feel the pressure because it helps you kind of build your confidence to some degree.
Yeah. It's funny, in all of the interviews that I've done since I started this practicing with purpose for lawyers only, I don't know that anybody has ever mentioned that. And that is such a valuable perspective, right? To take note of that about the toll on our ego, that constant criticism and finding fault and opposing counsel, looking for every hole in your argument. And you miss this and that constant sort of angst around that, and getting really intentional again about finding ways to offset that. And you'd alluded earlier to go back to the testimonials on your webpage, right? I often encourage my coaching clients, keep what I call a brag list, right? Everything, all of the qualities that you can love about yourself, like some way to offset that ego bashing and to distance yourself so that we don't get our sense of value from others, but that we own it internally. So thank you for sharing that. It's funny, amazing to me that hasn't come up in the conversation, because it is, as I'm thinking about it, I think it's one of the key reasons that so many people also end up leaving the practice a lot. Just can take such a beating, right, on your sense of self if you let it. And when you talked about those three with wisdom, did you ever read the book? I think it was Carol Dweck. She's a professor, the book called Mindset. Have you ever read that?
No.
Worth checking out, because she talks, it's about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So, and again, for our listeners out there, I always bastardize her name. I think it's Dweck, Carol Dweck. She's a psychologist. The book is called Mindset. And I would have sworn, if you'd ever asked me, that nope, growth mindset for sure. I love to learn. I've always had just voraciously read, but it's not so much, it's about, and lawyers are really guilty of having a fixed mindset, that if from the time you were young, you were told you're really good at something, that people who were really complimented as you tend to be more likely to not want to put it at risk. So we won't try things that we think we're likely to fail at, right? We protect that identity. And in doing that, we stop ourselves from really fully growing, where you fall flat on your face, learn to, I call it a failabration, right? Like learn to celebrate your failure. So that really tweaked for me when you said about that wisdom piece, so closely tied to growth, always looking to grow. And on that would tie in, I know you've touched a little bit on this as well, but how you obviously have really maintained your passion for the practice. What advice do you have for our listeners out there on how they can maintain or rediscover their passion for the practice of law?
Yeah, I think part of it is this too, and this is going to sound a little cynical and all that, but when you get your days and you're like, why am I doing this? This is, the headaches, the clients complaining, this, that. I always stop and think, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I know it sounds bizarre, but I'm like, I'm just not the type to sit on a Florida beach, like I would still be a day or two, it'd be fine. But after about a week or so, I'm like, I'm not a retiree yet, And as far as other work and job, you see other people and they have their headaches and stresses too. So I think for me, that gives me a recommitment to law in the sense that I realized, yeah, this is probably what I need to do and what I focus on. So I almost I call it calling your own bluff. Like, hey, everybody's out. Well, what exactly are you going to do? Get this Garden of Eden stuff out of your brain. That's not available to you. And do that. And then the other thing I said, though, is what I really like is, and I think you pointed on it too, is when you read the testimony, again, that's not something everybody can do, but when you factor in the successes and the testimonies, to me, the reason I like doing that is that isn't just me telling myself, oh, you're good, you're this, that, whatever. When I go read it, other people are saying, good job, Tom did a great job, this, that, whatever. Coming from someone else and you hear it, it's great. That like, this isn't just you saying it, you actually backed it up and some other human being believes that about you. And the last part I'll say is this, is I'm a huge proponent of streamlining. And I read this, I forget which book it was, whatever, but I stole this from a book too. But I think a lot of lawyers get burned out. So we want to do so much, we're flying around. And some guy made a point, he says, look, you can make a great to-do list, whether it be on a daily basis, career basis, and so forth. He goes, but if you keep adding things to it, you never get to it. It almost becomes another stressor.
Yeah.
So make a not to-do list and things that you just should not be doing. And so like at our firm, whether it be certain administrative things or supplies or reviews, whatever it is, I'm like, as much as I want to jump in and do it, because I could probably do it better, that's on my not to-do list, and I let that go. So I think for lawyers, that can kind of, a lot of times just get bogged down with so many stuff. So just figuring out not only what matters to you, what you don't want to spend your time doing, what you don't need to do, and so forth. It's hard sometimes to do it, but that sometimes gives you a freedom and your job doesn't become as burdensome.
Yeah. I love that not to-do list. It's funny, as you were saying that, I was smiling because with my law firm clients, when I'm doing work on that, we're familiar with docketing. So I have them do what I call a time audit and literally go for a week, docket everything. As much as we hate the docketing, docket where all your time goes. And then at the end of the week, you take all of those dockets, you recognize where your time is going. Most people are shocked at where the majority of their time is being spent. And then I have them break it down into categories: stuff you love to do, stuff you don't mind doing, and stuff you really don't enjoy doing, and take everything you've done, all those docketed hours, personal, professional, every little thing, time on TV, scrolling on YouTube, and you spread it over those categories. And then you start in your things you don't like to do and find a way to eliminate, delegate, or automate, get it off your list. So that not to-do list, I thought that was brilliant. And I've got to say, I love your call your own bluff. That's a classic. Loads of quotable quotes here for our listeners as well. You may want to re-listen. That's so good, because the grass always seems greener. So just calling your own bluff and reminding yourself, I think that's such great advice. So what's something that you know now that you wish you knew when you'd first started?
Boy, I wish I knew when I first started. This is a toughie for me because I literally didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know anything when I started. So there's a lot of things I wish I knew, but I think the one thing I will say is, I think I went into like a lot of lawyers. I had this running debate with myself. I would sit there with the partners. I worked at a big firm to start with. And I always kind of felt like, first I was awed by them. They're older, they had the gray hair, the suits, the ties. And then as I watched them, I started thinking like how I would do it and how I would do it. And I just, and so part of me thought, I think I could do that better. I could run the meeting better. I could write a better phone, whatever. But then the other part of me it was programmed in this, no, it can't be. It must be wrong, right? They're partners in the firm. They know it, this or that. So I think the one thing I wish I knew younger was that, I'm in that league. I'm in that category. So for young attorneys, I always tell them that you kind of see them like they look like they're superior beings. And maybe that's just the way I looked at it. They're so knowledgeable, this, that, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're just people like you and me, and you can easily get there. And And the other thing that goes with it, when I do with my students for this class, the Art of Lawyering, I say, look, I'm going to treat you like lawyers. I'm the senior lawyer, a judge, a client. You're the junior lawyer, the answering lawyer. But, you got to get here on time. You got to let me know if you're going to miss it, your assignments. We go over stuff. I say, start acting a lawyer. And part of the reason is you can't just wake up one day and say, I'm now a lawyer. I'm going to start doing differently. You can, but it's just very hard to totally change after years of not doing it. The best thing to do is start acting like it now while you're in school and practice and get better. And then one day you're used to it. Your habit becomes your character, as I think as Aristotle said. So that's what I think what I would tell people is, one is distill all that crap. You can't do it. You're just as good as them and your time will come, and just start acting like it now.
Yeah.
And if I'd done that earlier, I think I was a little too kind of nervous in the beginning if I had to redo it.
Oh, that's great advice. So like, just live it, like live into it. Right. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, because I started a bigger firm, and then I went out on my own firm for many years, and we started late and made up for lost time. I had 3 kids in 3 years. And when I found out we were pregnant with the third, I ended up doing a trial merger with one of the sort of big guru firms in our boutique industry and social justice law. And just what you said, it's like, oh, these are like the demigods of the industry. And, here I am with my however many years practice coming in there. But I remember the first quite a number of cases I'd be putting out, hey, I've got this case, here's the issue, and there was no brilliant insights coming back that I hadn't already thought of. And I'm like, wow, all of those years thinking like, this is the epitome. And I was already there, right? I had that. So I think that's such great advice. And Toz, this has been such an amazing discussion. I could keep talking forever, but I'm mindful of the time here. So I normally like to end with asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? And this doesn't have to be about law, just one of those aha moments where you shift how you look at things and it affects how you see the world or show up.
That's a really good aha moments. I don't know I think there was a period of time I went through. For me, I remember I just was kind of stressed, and I remember I was getting migraine headaches and all that. And I thought it was work, but it was also personal. And I think what I was trying to do was I was trying to be all things to all people in my career, but then even in social lives and family. And I was afraid, whatever. And I remember one day I was being on a beach, and I was just kind of vacation thinking. I remember a friend of mine who since passed away, is my high school good friend of mine. And he just was a very good guy, but he was himself, and he was kind of like a little, I don't know how to describe it. He knew who he was, and he just kind of accepted that. He'd laugh at himself, and everybody appreciates. He had this authenticity because he would make stupid jokes. He just realized, oh, they're not going to like this. I'm that, whatever. And a bell went off for me going, holy cow, just be you.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to describe it. It's just an easier path than trying to be everything to all people. And that kind of fits, I think, with Tony Robbins. I might have been doing that at that time too. I realized what matters to me, what do I offer the table? And I just realized, like as a lawyer, not every client's going to want me. Some are going to want the lawyer who yells and screams and does whatever. Others are going to want the very meek one. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I'm aggressive, and you don't have to please everybody. And once I think I had that aha moment, just took a weight off my chest, and I could just be me versus in final contest. I remember I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, for example.
Oh, me too. Oh my God.
You probably know this one then, but anyway, I remember he, up to the time he was born USA, he was the big star. Then he broke up the band, and then he came back for the reunion tour, and they interviewed him, and he did a lot of change therapy and all stuff from the heyday to when he came back in '99 with his reunion tour. And he said for the first time, he goes, when I went on stage, I felt like I was Bruce Springsteen, not like I was playing the role for Springsteen. And that kind of, I was like, I get it. So maybe it's just we all get at a certain age of maturity, realize just be yourself. But I think that was my aha moment. To hear someone famous go through it all, is like, he's right. That's when you just go be yourself. And some people may hate Bruce Springsteen. He didn't care. He's got more than enough fans, right?
Yeah, that is a powerful shift, right? I think that's so beautiful. And for our younger listeners out there, start now. Start with that power shift right now. It'll be a game changer for you in life. We are so conditioned to define our identity based on what we think other people expect of us and showing up that way. And when you're able to let that go and just be authentically yourself, you're going to be more attractive. You're going to bring more joy and passion into your life. You're going to attract the kind of people you want. So what a great note to end on. So thanks so much for that. And again, thank you, Thomas, for this discussion. There being so many golden gems here. Really appreciate the conversation.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. And thank you for your kind words. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from you too. So thank you.
Yeah, no, this has been great. Thanks. And for our listeners out there, make sure to get some more information about Thomas. You can check out on their website at simeonemiller.com. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes for you, or on Facebook as well at Simeone Miller LLP, and or on LinkedIn. And I am sure you have all just got loads of value from this episode. This is one of those episodes I encourage you, go back and re-listen to it again. You know, Thomas has such an easy conversational style, and buried in that, there were so many really valuable nuggets and really simple but powerful tips that you can apply to help rekindle your purpose and passion in how you practice law. So make sure to share this with others as well. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that yet. And also make sure to check out my Art of Feminine Negotiation podcast as well. It's called Art of Feminine Negotiation. It is not gender-based. We all have masculine and feminine energy. The idea being show up and lean into some of those traits that maybe we've considered liabilities, and recognize them as your greatest strength in negotiating your best life. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice on purpose. Find a better way to practice law for you so that you can rekindle that passion and make a difference in the world, negotiating your best life on your terms. Until next time, take care.